Next, let's see how you can make measurements with imperial units. There's an important difference between metric rulers and imperial rulers. So metric rulers give measurements with decimals. And that's very convenient for us. And that's because there's 10 divisions in 1 centimeter. So 10 divisions. That makes it so that when you read those little tiny increments between a centimeter, you're getting a millimeter reading. But imperial rulers are a little different. They give measurements with fractions. And so an imperial ruler is not divided nicely into 10 divisions. They actually have usually 16 divisions between 0 and 1 inch, or between 1 inch and 2 inches. So for making measurements in inches with an imperial ruler, first we read the whole inches. So we see how far along the ruler we are. Then we have to read the fraction. And the fraction part is going to be the important skill that we're going to focus on today. And we need to make sure that the fraction part is always simplified. Let's start with an example. What is the reading of this measuring tape at the red arrow there on the screen? So again, we start with reading the whole numbers first. So we see that we're past 1 inch, we're past 2 inches, and then we're part of the way between 2 and 3. And just by looking, you can see that this line comes halfway between 2 inches and 3 inches. So the way we'll actually say this is that it's 2.5 inches. And we write it with the whole number of inches and then the fraction, 2.5 inches. And I'm going to use the double apostrophes for the inches symbol. So if we're going to be making imperial measurements, that means we need to get used to some of these fractions that come up a lot. So let's go through the important fractions on an imperial measuring tape or an imperial ruler. So the first one we saw was the 1/2 mark. So there's the 1/2 mark between 2 inches and 3 inches. Now, if you split the 1/2 into 2, so we go to the next halfway division between 2 and 2.5, we have 1/4. So that reading would be 2 1/4 inches. And similarly, if we go to the other side of 1/2, we have 2 3/4 inches. So the measuring tape can be read in halves, it can be read in quarters, and we can also read it in eighths. If we split that quarter in half, we have a fraction of eighths. So this is 1/8 on the measuring tape. And then lastly, on this measuring tape, it gets really small. It goes down to 1/16 on the measuring tape. So these metric rulers are going to give us measurements in sixteenths, eighths, quarters, or halves of an inch. The best way to get used to making these measurements is just to practice a few. So let's go through a few together. So first of all, what's the reading of this measuring tape where the red arrow is? And we can tell that it's between 3 and 4. So it's going to be 3 and some fraction of inches. Now let's try to find that fraction. The easiest way to usually start is to find those common ones like 1/2. So I can find 1/2, the fraction line on the ruler, and I can find the 1/4 line. So we know it's not a half measurement or a quarter measurement. And let's go down one more to the 1/8 line. And so we can now see that this one, that where the red arrow is measuring an eighth, some number of eighths of an inch. So if this is our first eighth, then the next jump is 2/8, and that's 1/4. and the last jump is 3/8. So this measurement on the measuring tape is 3 3/8 inches. Okay, how about this next one? So we can see that we're really close to 2 inches. Not quite at 2 inches though, so we're going to be 1 and some fraction of an inch is our measure. So again, let's run through the fractions. We have our half, our quarter, our eighth, and we see that this one is actually even on the smaller division, it's on the 16th division. So we could either count up by 16ths, which would take a while, jumping from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3/16, 4/16 to 5/16. That's going to take a while. So instead, the easier way is actually to count back. We're 1/16 back of 2 inches. So that's going to be 1 15/16 of an inch. Some measuring tapes have even more divisions. That means they can get even more accurate. So in this one, it actually has divisions of 32. And we can see that here. If we check out this line here, this is our 3.5 mark, our 1/4 mark, halfway between 3 and 3.5. 1/8 is halfway between 3 1/4. 1/16 is halfway between those, and that means that this last little smallest division on this measuring tape is actually 1/32. So it's a very, very accurate measurement as a fraction of an inch. So if we want to read where the red arrow is, we could go, okay, well, we know it's landing on a 32nd division, and we can count from there. So if this is 1/32 here, we're going 1, 2, 3 30-seconds past 4 inches. So our measurement is 4 3/32 inches.